All right. Well, I'm ready when you are. So,
All right. Yeah. I'm good to go. Let me check my mic here.
just make sure you know in your OBS settings where it's saving your copy of the audio or whatever.
Yeah. It's recording it as a blank video, so it
Okay.
should just be recording.
Yeah.
It should
Right.
just be saving it in the same spot I save all my 14 clips.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I'm recording now.
Right on.
Are you recording as well?
I am recording as well, man.
All right. Did you want to do the initial introduction, or did you want me to do it?
Yeah, you go for it.
All right. What's up, guys? Raziel here with Rhomagus for our first episode of Deduce and Discuss, where we generally cover topics relating to gaming, especially, and most of the time, specifically MMORPGs, and some deeper concepts than a lot of other channels may go into. Today's episode number 1, is Escapism. So to introduce myself, obviously, if you're watching this on my channel, you already know who I am. But if you're watching this on Rhomagus's channel, I am Game Musings with Raziel is my YouTube channel, and I cover MMOs, and primarily the MMO I'm playing at the moment, which right now is Final Fantasy XIV. But I've played games, MMOs, since 1999, Asheron's Call, Dark Age Camelot, World of Warcraft, of course. The list goes on and on and on. And Rhomagus, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Rhomagus Asclepiad. I used to have an old show in the 14 community. I'm mostly involved with Final Fantasy. I don't really consider myself that much of a gamer, even. I mainly just consider myself a Final Fantasy player. I try not to get too involved in it, which is probably what we're going to be discussing today in regards to the subject title. But yeah, I started Final Fantasy 11 back when it released stateside in around 2003, 2004. It was my first PC game, so I ended up having to buy a PC to even build it. So Final Fantasy 11 ended up being a really grounding concept for me when it came to external, like non-console gaming and stuff. So it brought me not only into the new world of MMOs, but also PC gaming in general.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. All right, so let's talk about the motivation for the show. Rhomagus was one of my original watchers and followers on my Twitch stream long before I was affiliated and everything. And we used to come and talk some shit and some banter. And over time, we kind of realized that we had a lot of common opinions and also some disagreements, but that doing a show like this would be a fun thing to do. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say most of the disagreements are really just nuances.
Right.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, I would generally tend to agree. Like, the draw of your show was that you're willing to say whatever you want, whenever you want. It's very much a free speech thing, and I really dug that. And the people that surrounded yourself around that show also dug that as well. It seems to be kind of like a relic of the past, where free speech has become this sort of bad word.
Yeah, very much so.
And I very much disagree with that. So I always try to gravitate myself towards others that speak freely.
Right. Yeah, it's good to.
So
People generally tend to surround themselves with like-minded individuals, which is good in the sense that you can realize you're not the only sane person left on this fucking planet, but
right, exactly.
Also that it makes you want to avoid, though, being completely in an echo chamber. And unfortunately, in the past, 10, 20 years ago, an echo chamber was fairly easy to avoid because most people were of a sane mind and would agree with most of what you were saying. And if they didn't, you could have a cordial discussion about it. These days, if someone disagrees with you, you're automatically a racist, a Nazi. The list goes on and on and on and on.
Oh yeah, people don't want to feel uncomfortable.
Right, exactly. They want to live in a world where no one's feelings are ever hurt, and that world and a world with free speech can't coexist.
Yeah, but also one of my motivations for the show is just to have a creative outlet. Yeah, which again is what we'll probably get into in the show. You know,
Right,
there's
right,
you
right.
got you got your day in and day outs. You know,
Yeah,
you got
absolutely.
the everyday doldrums, and you don't want your life to turn into you wake up, you go to a job you hate, you come home, you zone out for 4 hours, and then you just go to sleep to do it all again.
Right. No, I
You
agree
know,
completely. I
you know,
mean,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Your life turns into that '80s song, "Everyone's working for the weekend," and it's
yeah,
not.
yeah.
It's not a good. I mean, it's a fine song to listen to, but it's not a philosophy for life.
No, absolutely not. And unfortunately, I think
Yeah.
most people do live that way, and we all have to have our creative outlets. I mean, that's why I originally started my YouTube channel about 3 years ago. Was it was never, a concept of I need to make some money. I got to jump on this PewDiePie train or whatever the fuck was going on with that. It was I need an outlet to vent my frustrations with the games I was playing and with for my passion for the genre. And it's been a great outlet. Twitch has been as well.
Right. Well, and yeah, that's a huge part of escapism to start. Well, I wouldn't say escapism to start with, but it can be the groundings of, and really, there's not really a huge difference. And why don't there's a very fine line, but I would say between escapism and exploring. You know, I don't
Yeah.
know. What do you think? What do you think about escapism? What does escapism mean to you?
I think it means two things. I think there's healthy escapism, and I think there's destructive escapism. Because healthy escapism, for example, is something that you can focus on and you can do to get away from things in life when either at that moment in time you just don't have the energy or the strength or the capacity to deal with it at that moment. You need more time to process. Uh, a perfect example of that is I remember back in 2006, Burning Crusade had just come out, and I actually hadn't bought it yet. It had been out for like 3 weeks. I hadn't bought it yet, and I was in college. I'm showing my age there. I'm old as fuck. But I was in college, and I had just gone through a really bad breakup with this girl that my girlfriend that I was really super, head over heels in love with, and I'm the one that broke up with her because I realized it just wouldn't work because our life goals didn't line up, and also directly afterwards a very toxic rebound relationship that destroyed a friendship in the process. So I needed to get away from that, because I had my homework, I had my schoolwork, I was doing a bunch of shows in school because I was, a theater major, and so I needed a way to get out of my head, out of the melancholy, hitting myself and focusing on my mistakes. So I picked up Burning Crusade, and I no-lifed the shit out of that for a few months. And overall, it's one of the biggest things that helped me through that situation, and it helped me have time to process and not focus on the negative thoughts and feelings. Now, toxic, and I hate the word toxic, but I'm going to use it here. The bad kind of escapism doesn't even have to involve video games. It's where you are past the time where you say, okay, it's time for me to deal with this now. I've built up my strength and energy, and I've got my head on my shoulders straight, and you just numb yourself exponentially. A good example of this is someone who's an alcoholic. Drown their sorrows in alcohol day in, day out, destroying their health, their friendships, their jobs, and because they just absolutely 100% refuse to deal with anything in their real life. So that's essentially what escapism is to me. Those two different sides of the coin.
Yeah. For me, I would say, they're so it's such a tightrope, taking into account like this sort of that the unhealthy aspects of escapism and the supposedly healthy aspects of escapism. So in order to sort of free yourself of that tightrope, I try to just use a different word entirely that sort of sums up the same concepts. And that's why I used before. It's the difference between escaping into something and exploring something, So like, for example, well, I mean, I wouldn't like, well, you used drinking, for example. And what that the unfortunate part of drinking is it literally ruins your motor functions.
Oh, for sure.
It lowers your ability to think. But like for other drugs, and granted, they work in a similar way, but there are plenty of people that can have vast and life-changing experiences when doing certain drugs like DMT or
doing mushrooms, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like psychedelics in general.
I'm no stranger to those.
I am, but like at the same time, I don't mind that there's a healthy way to go about doing psychedelics and an unhealthy way of doing psychedelics.
Absolutely. I mean, I know from
personal experience, you get in. Tell a funny story here. You get into if you're around the wrong people when you're doing psychedelic drugs, and you get in a dark mindset while doing them, it can lead to either some really funny results, but it's still pretty terrifying for the person who's high. Like I had an example. I had a friend who was on mushrooms, and we were all on shrooms, and we were all tripping balls, and we were having a good time. And this is back when I was in my late teens. And all of a sudden, my friend, he had just gone through a breakup with a girlfriend, and he was pretty depressed. So we told him beforehand, hey, you probably shouldn't do these mushrooms. And he did them anyway. And he just disappeared on us, and we had no idea where he was. So we started searching for him, and we found him in his truck with the windows rolled up. And, we knocked on the door, and we said, what are you doing, man? And he said he was going to kill himself. And luckily for us, his plan to kill himself was to get into the truck and roll the windows up so he'd suffocate. So he could, because no air could get into his truck, because he could see the air, and he's like, no air can get in the truck if the windows are rolled up.
That was his mentality.
Yeah, and so we decided to just leave him there and just keep an eye on him, because we're like, he's not going to die. He'll just sit there and eventually fall asleep. So
right.
What happened. And but yeah, I mean, but he can get into a really dark place, because that, if he would have gotten that thought in his mind of I'm going to kill myself and would have tried something else, it could have been a lot of trouble.
Well, yeah, and in your friend's example, like he was in the wrong mindset to begin with.
Exactly.
Right, but before he started the recreational activity to escape, right? He was already in the wrong mindset, so that the drug just ended up enhancing that mindset more,
exactly.
rather
alcohol
than
will do the same thing. I mean, alcohol.
Yeah.
I mean, some people, regardless of who they are, will be either an angry or a happy drunk, regardless of the mood they were in before.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of people. I think the majority of people, if whatever mood they're in before they drink, it just escalates it exponentially after.
Yeah, from my personal experience, that's what I've noticed. I don't drink either, but from the people that I've been around that do, they just turn into like themselves plus 10, right?
And then the filter drops, right.
Yeah, the filters though. It's like you can. It's weird because you could still kind of have conversations with them. You can't really tell if they're drunk until they start getting really far along and they start slurring their speech, or the conversation starts going in a weird way.
Yep, I agree completely.
But yeah, for me, is I try to use an entirely different word, and so I don't really refer to it as healthy escapism or toxic escapism, because I, like you, don't like that word toxic.
Right.
I prefer to just choose to call it exploring, right? So, for example, you and your other friend that wasn't going through a bad breakup, you guys were probably having a sort of like mental exploration.
Oh yeah, but you're having a fun time.
Yeah. Well, you can have a fun time, but like you can also, like, I mean, I've heard of experiences of people, finding themselves on these sort of DMT trips, and they're like studying their trip as if they had a dream journal, like.
Sure. I never personally experienced it on that level, but I definitely had some like pretty incredible experiences. But overall, when it finally wears off, I'm just like, okay, that was fun. It was like going on a roller coaster, and it was a good time. But again, I've never used a drug, with the exception of one short period of my life, which is actually quite recent. But I've never, other than this one time period, I've never used a drug as a form of escape. It's always a form of, let's have a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never used drugs recreationally, but I could see myself using them in an exploration mindset. Like
Sure,
I'm
absolutely.
I'm very much interested in you know internalization,
Right,
introspection, uh, the study of your own dreams. What's your mind trying to tell you when you're sleeping?
right. Your subconscious, right?
Exactly.
And I mean, to tie this back into the MMOs, I mean, because let's be honest now, the vast majority of games these days, in the last decade at least, uh, even if they're single player games, have online functionality. And the vast majority of the most popular games are you play with other people online. I mean, perfect examples that are not MMOs like Diablo 3, Fortnite, PUBG, Call of Duty. Like the vast majority of the experiences is with other people and in another world, even if it's not an RPG, or
Hmm.
even if the player count of your current game is set it to a max of 6 or 8. It's still uh, very much a place you can go that isn't reality. Um, so when I look at the advent of the MMO, because when I first started playing MMOs, I would definitely describe my mindset how you did is it was exploration. It was, man, I want to go on a fantasy adventure in another world, be another character, and not because I didn't like who I was, but because I mean, I always dreamed, as a kid, going on like an adventure in the same way that, Bilbo fucking Baggins did in The Hobbit, or, you know, stuff like that. And so that was my initial draw to MMOs. And I'm sure, as you're very well aware, online games, especially where there's a lot of social interaction, are very easy to get engulfed in and addicted to.
Hmm.
And I think over time, for a lot of people, that's what it progresses to, where it's dealing with this fantasy world and dealing with these, adventures and these characters becomes 10 times more appealing than anything they believe they could accomplish in their actual life. Uh,
Well, yeah,
you know,
one of the draws to a lot of these folks that play MMOs is it literally is their only source of social interaction.
right, and not just
It-
social interaction, but accomplishment of
yeah,
being anything.
yeah, of all things, and that's a very human need. I think MMOs capture an aspect of gaming that what was there before, but wasn't on such mass appeal.
Right,
Single player games.
right,
The loner gamer. Now
sure,
granted that's still a
right,
common stereotype, but
and
the
not
loner
just that,
gamer.
right. I mean, like
Go,
with
go ahead.
sorry to cut you off, but like it popped in my head here. Like before MMOs, every game you would play, RPG or not, the game is telling you a story where you control somebody else in that story, but that story is very streamlined. It's very on rails, and so like for a good example, the Soul Reaver series, which I named myself after the main character of that for my YouTube channel. It's a great story. You get super involved in it. It's a story about time travel and vampires and dark mythology. But in the end, you're never playing it with the mindset of I am the character. That's never a thing
Mhm.
really. And the same with all the single player Final Fantasy games. You're watching. It's pretty much like playing a book. You get to experience a book on a
Right.
more intimate level. While
Mhm.
MMOs, especially the early ones, which were all sandbox and not theme park, uh, it was the first iteration of a game that was akin to, before this point, was only available in playing something like Dungeons and Dragons, a pen and paper game, which is your character in the game is an extension of yourself. You are, if you want it to be. There's no set story or destiny for your character. There's no, like there's rules, but there's no like rails that you have to be on and have to experience the story the same way everyone else does. And I think that appealed to a lot of people with, in regards to a place they could go and be successful and be somebody that other people want to be. That's they could never see themselves achieving in their actual real life.
Yeah, and that's what's really That's what's really depressing about the whole thing, right?
Right.
I think it's like why MMOs have captured people so much today. The draw is so intense. I remember
Right.
I'm just a small town kid. I grew up in a really small town in the middle of the woods, and I never ever would have thought that I would be talking on a daily basis to people, not only from different states, but different countries.
Right.
Like I used to raid with some friends that lived in England, and I would talk to them on the daily. They weren't business associates. I didn't fly over there. I didn't meet them. They weren't pen pals.
Right.
They were just as part of my day in and day out as my local American friends that I met in real life.
Sure.
Right.
I mean, I'm on the same page here.
Yeah, and what I think is also interesting is this emergence of like a grounded internet culture. Like I was talking to a German friend of mine, and he was throwing out all of these English memes. And I was like,
you just didn't get them.
no, I got them, and he got them too. That's what I thought was interesting. Is he was German, but we were speaking the same internet lingo.
I mean, especially in this digital age, which is another sad aspect. Is as far as technology is concerned, we're more connected as a species than we've ever been in the history of the human race. But at the same time, I think we're more disconnected than we've ever been, and divided.
Well, and I think we're more disconnected because of the escapism aspect of the entire thing. People they get lost in
the anonymity.
They get lost in the anonymity. They get lost in the irresponsibility. You don't have to really be that responsible for your. You don't have to keep up your
reputation.
Your reputation, exactly. That's what I was talking about. Yeah, you don't have to keep up your reputation online so much.
Right. On that though, that's actually not having to keep up your reputation in an online game is actually a more recent advent. I would say less than 5 to 8 years old, because in the early sandbox MMOs, before there were server transfers and name changes you could pay for and all that kind of shit. What server you rolled on, man, that was your reputation. If you were a helpful player and you were kind to people and went out of your way to do things for people, everyone wanted to play with you. Or if you were like a top tier PvPer, people would be afraid of fighting you. Whereas if you were a big cocksucker and you went around just being a complete dick, ninjing loot, trolling people, griefing people, your reputation would go down the shitter and no one want to play with you, and that's something you had to accept, because if you were a high level and the only way out of it was to re-roll on a different server and start all over with a different reputation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's gone away.
Yeah, well, and like there's been this like development of a shared internet culture that supersedes international borders. A lot of English phrases have become my day-to-days. I say I a lot, to say in agreeance, like I, instead of yes, and I'll say, and like, I'll even say you what, UWOT. I find myself saying that you what, and those are, or mad lad, we don't call each other lads here in the States, but I find myself, knowing what a mad lad is and kind of using it in daily parlance.
A bunch of the content I used to watch, especially back in my WoW days, is like Fat Boss TV, and they're from England, and they have very thick Cockney accents, and they're a hoot to watch, and and it's kind of funny because it also ties into my my theatrical training that I went to college for, because a lot of the courses you take is accents and different cultural. A lot of the plays you do are not written in the United States; they're not American plays, so they come with a lot of different dialects and a lot of different perspectives on what society is during the time those plays are written. Mm-hmm. So it's very. I think it's very awesome, but at the same time very tragic. because as we were talking about with the escape from society into an MMO because you feel you can accomplish things. One thing I brought up to you, if you remember earlier, a couple days ago over chat, was you have to decide, and this is something that can't be. It's going to be 100% subjective, and is what, even if you were as successful as you ever wanted to be right now in society, in your real life, whatever that is in your head, that's subjective. Picture it in your head, people listening right now, like as successful as you could possibly, you think you have the potential to be. So obviously, if you're an ugly 3'2" guy, you're probably not going to be a model, no matter how much you fucking want to do it. You know what I mean? Like there's certain things that are just out of some certain people's reach, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're a shitty person at all. It just means nature has restricted certain things on you, and no one can help that. But on the same token, that the person has to subjectively decide, if I could have that thing right now, if I could have all of that success right now, and knowing how much effort I'd have to put in to get it, but I know I'd get it if I put in the effort, is what society is going to give me better than what I'm getting out of being in this virtual world?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And that's something everyone has to ask themselves individually.
All right.
And that their answer is going to very much depend on two things. One, what their experiences have been in the real world up to this point, and two, what it is they consider success.
Yeah, most certainly, especially when it comes to success. Like, it has to, in my opinion, and like we were talking about, you can't, well, you can, but I think this is part of the whole toxic aspect of success chasing. It's that you're looking for the either condemnation or the approval of others, and you're not guaranteed either. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter how hard you work. I think that's one of the things that I grew up thinking, like, oh, as long as now granted, you can get by. Like one of the old Rolling Stones lyrics. You can't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes you can get what you need.
Absolutely.
Like the people, there are some instances where I could look at people that are down in the dumps, and it's just, well, you're not trying. That's it.
Right.
That's it.
Which may be true. Which may be true in a lot of cases, because sometimes even getting the will to try is more than people can muster. But and again, that relates to what their experiences have been up to that point, how much shit they had to deal with or not.
Indeed.
And the thing is, I mean, for me, when I escaped into World of Warcraft after that breakup, there was a double breakup in a short period of time. I would say it quite frankly saved me, because I knew that I wasn't escaping permanently. I wasn't going there so I never had to deal with the problem ever again. And maybe that's just because that's the type of person that I am. But I mean, I know life the game for months. I didn't let it affect my schoolwork or anything like that. But it very much let me get away from an amount of pain that at the time I didn't have the strength to bear. And I had to let it sit and cool down a little bit before I went back and picked it up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I remember I found Final Fantasy XI shortly after my divorce. And I was in a similar mindset, but I wasn't. I never really connected 11 with trying to escape from my divorce. The things I would do to escape from the feelings of my divorce. Right. It sounds really stereotypical, but like I would literally brood in my room and listen to
Coldplay.
listen to The Cure. I listened to The Cure. It wasn't Coldplay, but yeah. I would listen to all these like sappy, bittersweet love songs.
Get your cereal bowl full of emos that comes to the company.
Exactly.
I get it, man. And
that was totally me at 20 years old.
And that's totally normal for your age. And I think that though something that probably was underneath both of our escape after a breakup into a game was, regardless of who was at fault for the breakup, or for the bad thing that happened to you that you're escaping from, you feel like a failure. Especially as a man, failure I think hits men especially hard because we're kind of, society kind of grooms us that it's not okay to fail, and that especially these days.
One of the reasons why it's not okay to fail, because if you do fail, everyone else fails. You know,
Right.
You as a man have been thrust, just based on your biology, you've been kind of thrust into this position of leadership.
Well,
that's one of the things that I've
workhorse, and you're supposed to be a powerful, strong leader. And failure we see as weakness. And so when we fail, we feel like failures. And so a game, we're like, I may be a failure right now in real life, but I can be a success in this game. I can kick some ass and be with my friends in this game and kill hard bosses and kill people in PvP and whatnot.
Kind of, though, right? And I think me and you have noticed this on, well, I mean, you could just go to the 14 official forums or on the subreddit, you know. You've got people that can't even do that in a video game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, like I've said, I mean, how many times have I said on my streams where I say my estimate is over 70% of people that play any game are fucking terrible at it. And I would say half of the people that are terrible at it don't know that they're terrible at it.
Well, but there's some people that like Tanxiety, for example.
Right. You know, yeah, my Tanxiety video. Yeah.
How far along are you in your own psychosis that you can't even in a virtual world take on the mantle of a hero? Like you can't even take on the mantle of a hero in your dreams. You know,
right. It's such an anxiety-inducing thing.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why is MMOs and games, and because they're so, especially, you know, they're so integrated with other human beings, it ties back into an innate human emotion and human desire to be respected, to be loved, to be liked, to be accepted, needed, to feel needed. Everyone wants that. I mean, I don't care if you're, you know,
it's necessary.
Yeah, I don't care if you're a batshit crazy feminazi or you're, you know, a hardcore MGTOW monk. You know, two opposite ends of the spectrum. That desire you can't wish away. You can't just will that away and go, okay, I no longer 100% care if anyone that exists on this planet, friends, family, like me. Like,
I'd go even further and say, I would go even further and say it's not even a desire. It's an innate genetic trait. It's a part. It's exactly. It's a part of being human.
Yeah, it's an innate need, and it's a hard. I mean, you can temper it, and I mean, like I feel I have, where I have a pretty thick skin, and it takes a lot to to really make me feel like I'm being attacked, especially in the sense that before I can give any weight to someone's opinion of me, I have to first respect them. And there are very few people in the real world and the virtual world that I actually respect. So they can call me every name under the sun. I mean, you've seen it in my YouTube comments and even people who come troll me on my Twitch streams. And I don't fucking give a shit. I think it's funny because they don't know me. They don't know anything about me. Just from the, you know, the retarded shit that they've said, I can already tell I'd never have respect for this kind of person.
Right.
And so their comments and their views on me don't affect me in any way. Now, if someone I really respected and cared about, you know, said something hurtful to me, it would probably mean something.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it also depends on how close it is. Like, are they tapping into a particular insecurity? You know, so
right. Did it hit a nerve?
Exactly. If there's someone that I like see as a mentor or someone who I look up to, and they were to somehow at one point in a moment of weakness, really hone in on something that I'm insecure about, and then voice that and use that against me, then I would feel attacked and worried. But more on like that's what people say. You got to have a thick skin when you go online. You don't, because you're not. You don't have to have a thick skin,
right? Because chances are you're not going to ever meet those people.
Exactly. You know,
and I would argue that you don't need a thick skin. You need to laugh at bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, it's not having a thick skin.
They have no context.
People
right?
only have as much power over you as you give
right.
them.
Indeed. You know, like I had this one healer that was pulling some bullshit in a daily run that I was doing in 14 the other day. You know, and they were throwing out all these insults and stuff. It stemmed from me jumping ahead, you know, because they said, "Hey, wait up! This is I just got a few new abilities or whatever." And I was like, "Well, we're level 80. Right? You've been doing this for a month now. You know how to heal. Just heal. You know, like so. I'm going. I pull a pack of mobs, and then I pull 2 packs of mobs. You know, which is standard procedure at that level." And I'm finding I'm on Paladin.
Pull everything you possibly can.
Exactly. You know, because other people are using their time as well, right? It's not just the healer show. You know, like, and even as a tank, I'm not assuming that I'm better than everybody else. And that
but as a tank, you set the pace.
You set the pace. Exactly. That's it. That's part of the tank's responsibility is to set the pace of the dungeon. Everyone else has to fulfill their role in order to fulfill that pace. And more often than not, when you're at that level, people just want to get through the dungeon. It doesn't matter if a thing pops up and says, "Oh, this is your first time here." It doesn't matter. It's your first time here. It's literally my 80th time.
Right.
You know,
right.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, I agree.
I can only watch the Praetorium cutscene so many times in a row before I start memorizing lines from it. You know, it's
right.
But anyways, this particular healer kept like throwing out all these insults, and it's like they never landed to begin with. I didn't need to have the thick skin because the insults by the face of them made no sense.
Well, you knew they were coming from a fucking idiot.
Exactly. It was just coming from a moron that didn't know what they were doing and that was trying to pull an ego trip, you know.
Sure.
And they had probably been handheld. I think their friend was the DPS. So like they probably don't play this game on their own. They probably
did you inspect them? Did you look at the healer's gear? I'm just curious.
I didn't.
That's usually the first thing I do when somebody starts insulting me. I look at their gear, not to like judge them and go, "Well, I have better gear than you," but seeing what their gear is kind of lets me know what their style of play is, how knowledgeable they are about their class. You know, are they melded correctly? Are they putting the right stats on their gear? And if someone comes in like, you know, and starts giving me some pointers and starts giving me even a little shit, and I look at them and they're, you know, fully savage tiered out, then I'll give it a little more weight and go, "Hold on, dude, where are you coming from with this?" But if they're in fucking like trash greens and have no melds, or like, you know, pulling an old school warlord and putting spell speed in his fucking samurai gear, I'm gonna instantly just be like, "Dude, shut the fuck up." Like,
yeah. But what I think is interesting, again, like this person was probably a product of escapism and not exploration. You know, they had gone into MMOs thinking that they're going to ooze, that this is a safe place for them to ooze their ego out onto others, and that they'll pick a role that controls. Healers don't control the pace.
That commands respect.
Yeah, that commands respect. But they control this person was trying to control the pace by sucking, by purposefully sucking, right? Like, see, that was the thing. Like, we would pull one mob, and all she would do was cast Cure, right? Like, she wouldn't throw out any stones or anything like that.
And
you know,
no
she wasn't
DPS. Right.
Exactly. She would just cure. So if she's just curing, if that's all she's doing, she's covering the tank, then pulling two packs of mobs should not be a problem. But then I saw her type in the chat, "Well, if he just wants to die, let's let him die." You know, like,
no, that's what you say. That's what you say to DPS, bitch.
Right. Yeah, you don't say that to the tank, because when the tank drops, everyone else drops. Even if no one else attacked the mob and they don't have enmity, that's still wasted time. Right? Like, if I drop and I have to go back to the beginning of the dungeon, you guys can't continue the dungeon without the tank. That
Right.
doesn't. There's no. You're not making any sense here. You know,
And-
when you have this
right.
mentality of, oh, just let them die.
And here's when you were talking about that person being using escapism in that way, which I totally agree. There are people that do that. And she may have very well been one of them. But here's a fucking what occurred to me also is, and get ready because this is going to be big brain 400 IQ. We're deep here. I think escapism. I mean, not escapism. Sorry, exploration. The mindset of exploration can also do the same thing if the exploration goes deep enough. What I mean by that is if they go so far into the spectrum of exploration that all gear, how the game functions, the rules of the actual game, because let's be real, it's not a real fantasy world. There are rules coded into the game. There are mechanics coded into the game. There are, very specific things of how you can be good and get better at the game. I've definitely met some people that are, I guess the best way to describe it is they're so hardcore RP, like RPers into the exploration thing, that they pay no attention to any of the other stuff. So that they get so deep into it that they also become a burden on the parties they join because they're equally as trash as someone who's so in depth in, the other side, the other spectrum of escapism. So I think where you can see the difference is in escapism, someone who's doing it in the escapism way, those people will generally tend to be the elitists because everything's so important to them that failure is not an option ever, no matter what, because this is their life. While on the other end, they generally, the people that are super deep into escapism, and thus that's why they're so bad. I mean, not escapism, sorry, exploration. That's why they're so bad. They generally don't throw out the insults. They're generally not mean to people, but they're just as much of a pain in the ass to group with and do stuff with because they ignore all the rules of the game and what it actually takes to be good because they're so invested in the fantasy part of it.
Yeah, but I think for those people though, it's not like that doesn't affect their real life.
No,
right?
It doesn't affect their real life. It's the same discussion. It affects the other people in the party.
It affects our virtual world for momentarily.
Your experience,
right?
sure.
Yeah. And for the most part, I'm okay with that. In that, like, you're gonna come across shitters. It's gonna happen. There's gonna.
Luckily, you're not gonna run into most of the people too deep into the exploration aspect of it.
Yeah.
And high end game content.
Right, right. They usually don't get that far. There's plenty of stories about,
or they flat out have no interest in it.
Yeah, there's plenty of stories about the Balmung people who failed because they want to play archer.
Or,
they don't want to be a bard.
Fucking World of Warcraft Goldshire and debauchery and fucking degeneracy that was going on all the time.
People are so much that they don't want to be considered a bard, so they don't write their soul stone. They want to be an archer.
Like, I want to be an archer. I don't want to be a bard. I don't play songs, motherfucker.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay. now, again, that just hurts. But all of that's sequestered to the virtual world.
Sure,
that
both,
sort of
both
exploration
players hurt the virtual world, but the pure escapism one hurts themselves. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and I still think that there's a place for those types of exploration players as long as they find like-minded people.
Get on an RP server. Yeah. Get in a fucking RP guild that has no intention of doing high-end content.
Right.
And just have fun. Have your parties, your beach parties, and no sweat off my sack. That doesn't bother me at all. If that's how they want to play the game. The only time I have an issue with them is when they do come into that content and they're unwilling to learn how the actual mechanics and stats in the game function because it doesn't align with their RP of their character.
Right. Yeah, that makes no sense.
That's what I'm like. Then why the fuck are you doing this content? You're not equipped to do this content. You're not in the mindset to do this content. So I think it can go both ways.
Well, and so what we've touched on is like in these MMOs and in these online internet interactions, like we can pull real life sort of lessons from them.
Right? Oh, absolutely.
And that's both the draw and what could be to the detriment of the player. But I think as long as you're pulling these life lessons out of the game and bringing them back with you into the real world. That's exploration,
Right.
you know. Like for example,
Absolutely.
if you're a geologist and you have to go study volcanoes, and you're talking to your friend who's a lawyer, they're like, yeah, I've got this business trip to Hawaii. They're like, oh, you got a business trip to Hawaii? It sounds like more like a vacation to me. You escape into Hawaii? No, I gotta go. I got to get in this fucking suit. I got to go to Kilauea, and I got to pull magma out of a fucking volcano. No,
Right.
it's not a vacation, dude. I'm
Right,
I'm a
right.
geologist going to Hawaii. Yeah, granted, it's nice and it's a popular vacation spot, and more than likely, I'm going to be having Mai Tais on the beach. It's going to be a thing that happens. But
Right.
you know,
Comes with
you're
territory.
sitting here behind your desk in whoever in an office building, and I am pulling literally, you know, the flames of Vulcan
Right.
from
Right.
below the
Right,
earth.
right,
and
right, right.
And I could die in the process if I
Sure.
fuck up. Right. So
Right. That's definitely not
Yeah.
someone escaping something.
right. That's
And-
someone exploring something, right? They're
Sure.
going there to find more out about the earth, and they're going to bring that knowledge. They're going to study it, and they're going to share that knowledge
Right.
with the world.
And I think overall, when I've been playing MMOs, I think I've been of the mindset of both. Because obviously, yeah, when I'm in an MMO, I want to be successful. I want my success. And the only way I can experience success in the game is if I'm confronted with challenging things and overcome it. You know, as we had this discussion a couple of days ago, prestigious things that set me above the rest, not so that I can piss on people and tell them that they're not as good as me. But
Indeed.
to give them something to aspire to in the game, in the same way I would do it in real life. Or like if, you know, I remember I did a show, a couple episodes of a show on HBO during my acting career, and you know, a lot of my other actor friends I went to school with and stuff congratulated me, and then they started asking me questions of like, well, who's your agent? Can I get in with the agent? You know, that got you this audition and everything. And I wanted to help them. I was like, sure, yeah, I'll talk to him and see if we can get you hooked up. And that's how I also approach those challenging, prestigious things in online games. By the same token, a lot of the games, I'm interested in the lore. I want to explore. I want to explore the characters' stories that I encounter. And I want to create stories with the other players in the game. So I kind of do both when I'm out. But you look at society around us.
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Go
Do both?
I'm escaping some of the stresses that in my life that I'm not refusing to deal with them. I just don't want to deal with them right this second, or I'll leave them for tomorrow because they're tomorrow's problems, right? Like I know I have this meeting tomorrow at work, or I know that you know I'm kind of depressed about something that happened, but you know what? This game will cheer me up, type of thing, you know. And so I use escapism in that way, but at the same time I want to explore and a fantasy world and have a good time with friends online. Which is part of the distraction. Part of the escapism is social interaction. In the same way that someone would go, man, I had a shit day. You know, I'm going to go over to my buddy's house and talk and eat a steak. Like, I view it, you know, to kind of cool down and unwind. I
I see
the same way.
I don't really see that as an escape, though. Like when you're going to see your buddy and you're going to talk, even if you're not going to talk about the subject at hand, like what you're doing is you're exploring the world in a sense with
I can see your point of view. So I guess I mean I guess the occasion ever since like for example I too am divorced. I definitely have escaped into gaming. But the funny thing is when I try to escape, use it as a flat out escape in the same way an alcoholic would use, you know, liquor to get away from the problem, to drown or numb the pain. It hasn't worked, and it actually makes me feel like I don't want to play the game. So,
no, I get you there.
Right, and so
there have been times where
escapism in that way, in the way we're talking about escapism, I don't think I'm capable of it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that like I don't escape, right? That's the problem. And that's the kind of actually that's been the main draw is why I wanted to talk about it, is because sometimes it sneaks up on you. You know,
like, for sure.
When I realized what I was probably doing was escaping was when I would be in the game and I would be hating what I was doing and I was getting really upset, and then I remembered when I logged in to begin with, I was already upset, and nothing changed. My frame of mind never changed at all, and there was no soothing feeling.
Yes, exactly. I've experienced.
Yeah, me personally, I don't just escape into video games, and actually, it's video games that I rarely escape into, but it's food, right? Like I'll eat bad food, and tell myself that I'm not going to eat bad food, and then the next day I eat bad food, and while I'm eating it,
the concept of it's not love, it's just food is hard to keep in mind.
Yeah, and not even that, but it's like even while I'm eating it, it's like this isn't even that good. I spent $10 that I didn't need to spend on something that's just not even that good. I remember like I would get French toast all the time out in the local breakfast restaurants that I have in my area, and I remember thinking like all this French toast is shit. Like I could make way better French toast than this.
Right.
Why don't I just make my own French toast, not pay $12 for it, pay $12 for a whole week's worth of French toast that tastes 100 times better. Well, why is it that I'm not doing it? I'm stuck in this process of, part of it is wanting it's sort of the same aspects of an MMO, like having that static sound of people talking and eating, and that's part of the restaurant experience.
It gives you a little bit of comfort that
exactly
you're not alone.
You're not alone, right? Exactly.
Right.
So you're here enjoying this meal like you might have enjoyed a meal with your spouse.
Sure.
You're kind of still doing those day-to-day things, just without the other person there.
Well, and I think exactly
the rest of the
intimacy intimacy is another deep human need. It's not. I mean, sure, you can categorize as a want, but it's a need in the same way that all those other social aspects we talked about. And intimacy is not. I'm not talking about sexual intimacy. I'm talking about intimacy as in like sharing things with somebody that you trust. Being close, physically close to someone you trust. That's intimacy. And I think, especially with society today, younger people, because like I'm considered a zillennial because I'm born in that small three-year window period between Gen X and the millennials. Mm-hmm. And but I think full-fledged millennials and Generation Z and the generation that's coming after Z are so fucked, and that's why they because of what society has turned into, the thought policing, the shaming you because, I mean, let's just be honest, let's not cut full punches here. You're shamed if you're born a male in today's society. You're automatically a rapist, and you're toxic and a bad person, and you're broken right out of the gate and need to be fixed.
That's the assumption, right? The assumption.
It's not true. It's not true, but that's what boys are taught. I mean, why is it such a big surprise that the vast majority of like hardcore gamers are male? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of female gamers out there, more than we think, but the vast majority of the gaming community from the 70s, from the Atari 2600 and the original fucking Pong.
People like our fathers,
right, to this point in time have been male. And I think that this escapism, because society sucks so much fucking ass now, it's so fucking shitty, especially if you're a dude, that it's turned into, like, I would argue for a lot of people, that earlier question we asked at the beginning of this podcast is what they're getting out of the game, whether it be World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy 14, 11, Call of Duty, Division,
something that the real world's not giving them.
Yeah, there is better than what they think the real world has to offer. And I think in some cases, not all, they're right. I think that
especially in your example of the person who was genetically predispositioned, that was genetically given a bad hand,
right?
Like that. That's a world. The online world is a world that they should be able to thrive in.
Right. Well, a perfect example, and I hope he doesn't mind me bringing his name up in here. I'm sure he'll be happy for his 15 seconds of fame. But he was also one of my first Twitch followers, and he's become both of our friends, is Warlord, a guy who watches our stream, a guy born with muscular dystrophy, and his life is not going to be long. Is not as long as ours. He's disabled, but games give him this outlet to escape from the limitations that his physical body and mind have put on him, and he has no control over that. And I would say in that case, escapism is an absolutely wonderful thing.
I think he should explore. He should be using this opportunity to, become a leader in the internet space.
Yeah, and I think he did.
And
on it, to be honest, I think.
Yeah, like I was talking about.
Like that motherfucker
before.
cleared E5S today, man.
Yeah, good for him, man.
Before
the internet is its own culture. The internet is kind of its own nation to an extent, and it's completely abstract, right? And that's one of the problems is because it's two different worlds. You've got the real world, and you've got this virtual world, and they operate by different rules. But there's no reason. There's no privilege that I have over a board, because I have a pair of
you start on an equal playing field as far as the game rules are concerned when you join, when you start playing the game. And I think that's what's so appealing to so many people of these younger generations is it really is the first space where they can enter in, be successful, be powerful heroes, be all these things that they can't be in their real life or don't think they can be in their real life. And they're starting out at the exact same place that everyone else did at some point. Their skin color doesn't matter. Their sexual preference doesn't matter. What they look like in real life doesn't matter. How much money they have in real life doesn't matter. And I think that's what's so appealing to a lot of people. And I think you can get stuck in that where, you think that, hey, this is great. I'm a fucking world tier raid leader, world first, kills. Fuck real life. It's just not worth going to.
But I still think that you could pull, right? Because there are these two different worlds in real life as well. There's the laborers, and then there's the intellectuals. There's the political class. And then
you mean there's the white collar and the blue collar?
The white collar and the blue collar, right? So white collar work exists, and it's mainly mental work. There's no reason a person that can do that has the same mental faculties to be successful in the virtual world can't be because
I agree completely.
Before the internet, you could say that the virtual world. I mean, Plato talked about the virtual world. With his shadows on the wall, his allegory of the cave, or you could say that was a sort of like a primordial simulation theory, and that like the world we actually live in is fake. And there's Matrix, but there's several different levels to it, right? Like you can make some Metal Gear Solid references and talk about how language, forms how we think about the world. Our entire perception is only allowed the words that are in our language. We use language to process the world in which we experience. But so you had these intellectuals of ancient times and today that live completely in feasibly what you could call virtual worlds. Journalists, for example, they write words on a page. And then old journalists, right? They write words on a page, and it gets printed on a newspaper that would get dispersed amongst a populace, and then stock prices would go up and down, and people would lose their houses, or people wouldn't lose their houses. There were winners and there were losers based on what stories came through, and resources were allocated based on what was written down on a piece of paper. It's a completely abstract thing. This journalist was able to feed themselves by doing that. They were able to feed themselves, clothe themselves, house themselves, right? This journalist didn't have to go out in the middle of the forest and hunt a deer, gut it, and then take it back home where he had a small little farm plot and he'd grow vegetables, he lived even that old pre-technology journalist lived in a world of abstractions, and you could also say royalty, You know,
Yeah.
the prince and the prince's children all lived in this abstract, but their abstract was important, right? The world, the abstract world that they lived in was important because it affected the real lives of those around them. And there's no reason that a person that can sort of flex themselves in the virtual world can't take, by exploring virtual worlds, can't take those skills and bring them back into the real world.
No, I agree. I agree completely. And to interject here, you brought up a good point that I want to expand on, where you said, and actually present an argument. You said that the virtual world and the real world have different rule sets, which is true. But I also think I'm of the belief they have a lot of the same rule sets too.
Well, I think one's based on the other.
Right.
It's like, I think the virtual world's rule set is based on the real world's rule set.
I mean, in our real world, there may not be magic and dragons and giant fucking robots that can shoot laser beams at you, but at the same time,
there's still conflict.
Yeah, in the fantasy world, though, there's people, like we said earlier, they want to be accepted. They want their needs. And I think this is something that needs to stay in virtual worlds that is kind of going away because of the shitty society and culture we live in. And it's why gamers are fighting against it so hard, is what you said. Just like in real life, there has to be, I think, for happiness to exist, sadness has to exist. And for both of those things to exist, there has to be winners and losers. Because what is better than when you've been a loser for a while at anything, and then you beat it, whatever that thing may be, whether it's in a game or in real life, you overcome it. That makes you happy, and it makes you feel strong and gives you motivation to keep pushing forward in life. And there needs to be winners and losers in real life, the whole capitalism thing. And then in the game, I think there needs, in an online game where there's more, it's not just you, there needs to be winners and losers. There needs to be, the winners, the people that work hard and win. They're the ones that get the most rewards. Just like the people that are fucking lazy and don't do anything and want everything handed to them on a silver plate just for existing. Those are the losers. Those are the people that need to sit the fuck down and stop complaining. And the bottom line is the internet, and because of our cancerous society that we live in our SJW society, they're trying to push that into games. And retail World of Warcraft is a perfect example of this, where there more and more as the game has moved on over the 14 years of its life, 15 years of its life, the things that you could win at, the things that you could work hard to accomplish have gone away, and everything's just been handed out. And because we got to make everybody happy. No one can ever feel sad. I mean, to even quote Asmongold, the guy that, I'm not a huge fan of his content. As a person, from what I've seen from his private channel, I think he seems like a decent guy. But when he said, and I think it was in one of his videos where he says, there has to be winners and losers, and what was it? It completely escaped my brain.
Well, there will be, but and that's the thing is, like, they're trying. I think what some people are trying to do is they're trying to build a utopia, but they don't understand that utopias can't exist. Well, not only can they not exist, that even the pursuit of a utopia, maybe the pursuit of a utopia is okay, maybe. Right. I'm still kind of torn on that, but the utopia itself is not good. Right. Like, even if we could live in a perfect world, we'd get fucking bored, man. Well, we would die. That's the beginning of death. Right.
Well, if you won a trophy for let's say you're on a chess team.
Maybe death is the road to awe.
Let's say you're on a chess team and you win a huge chess tournament. Like, you beat 30 people, and you win this huge trophy. And they go, here you go, you won this. Obviously, it's going to mean a lot to you. You're going to display it. You're going to be proud of it. And you'll probably even work harder to become an even better chess player after that, because you want to defend your title, right? But if everybody at that tournament got the exact same trophy, even though you won, you would feel like your trophy isn't worth as much. And the people that got all the trophies wouldn't value their trophy at all. They'd be like, okay, thanks.
I see. This is kind of
It's
where
the paperweight to me.
See, I think the problem is that there would still be a knowledge of everyone knows who won, everyone knows who's good, everyone.
Sure, I'm not saying the winner
everyone will still go to that person, right? So
I'm not saying that person would feel completely worthless and wouldn't feel, well, I'm not better than everybody. You're right. He would know he's better than everybody. He still have that pride, and everybody else that lost to him would still feel that way. What I'm saying though is like the actual thing, he's like, he could have figured that out just from playing people casually. He didn't have to enter a tournament. He didn't have to put that much effort in to figure that result out. And because of how much effort he had to put in to win, the pressure that's on you to win in front of all these people, that's the whole point of a tournament.
Well, that journey.
Right, and that how much strife he had to go through. If everybody, even the guy who, let's say there's a guy there who doesn't even know how to play chess, and he just showed up because he wanted a trophy, it devalues the trophy itself. It devalues the physical thing you take home, because then let's say you go home, you put the trophy on your shelf anyway, even though everyone got one, and somebody who wasn't at the tournament comes in, and says, "Oh, hey, where'd you get that trophy?" And you go, "Oh, I won a chess tournament." But then he finds out that everybody else at that tournament got the exact same trophy. That person then is going to have no idea that, even though you say you won, he's going to be like, "Okay, but it didn't really mean anything because everyone."
There's no point. You don't really need to impress that person, though.
No, you don't need to, but I think it's part of human nature to want to.
Right. I mean. But that doesn't mean that that's good.
No.
Yeah. So, where was I going to say?
I guess my train of thought of why I think though that I feel that it's good is because when you win and you get that sense of accomplishment that way,
it's an endorphin, right? It's the same. It's a
by impressing other people is I think it also. I think when other people are impressed by you, it can go one of two ways. It can either make you even more motivated.
Well, they can be jealous of you.
Sure, but it can make you even more motivated to push forward, to be even better, right? And then in turn, you help others be better. Or you can go the opposite direction, which is the bad direction, where you just treat everyone like garbage who you feel beneath you.
Well, it could go three ways. Like, you could crumble under the pressure.
Sure, that too.
I know for me, when I was in a leadership position and didn't know it, it was hard to meld the world with how I thought I was. The world was seeing me in a different view. And granted that, I think we've discussed this in previous conversations when people say, "Oh, hey, what are you doing here? You're too smart for this."
Right.
I hear that. I hear the words. I understand, and trust me, I know. But that doesn't make my day any better.
Right. And I totally understand. And I've been in the same position. I mean,
there's a much deeper existential dread that comes from that.
Right. Even my job.
It's what they're essentially.
Right. I totally get it. Because even like my job that I'm at right now, I've had my manager, tell me like, "Dude, you're really smart. You should move up." And in the same token, I've had people tell me after seeing a show or a film that I was in, they're like, "Dude, you're so good. How come you're not in Hollywood?" And instead of making me, in some instances, instead of me saying, "Oh, that makes me feel really good," they think I'm really good. It makes me feel like, well, I'm a failure because I haven't made it there. Because I'm not there. I'm not where you think I should be. So that means I must be a failure, or I'm not doing something right. Yeah. And so I can get totally both sides. I think like you said about the experience, about the exploration, I think all of these things we just talked about are part of that. What direction you choose to go with what happens to you.
What the chess player did, though, is that he heeded the call to adventure, right? Instead of staying and doing his little casual chess meetups with other players that may or may not be good, he put his skills to the test. And entered a tournament with the pressures of onlookers,
right?
But I mean,
I think what you're talking about,
he could still find the same sense of accomplishment. Because look at Ryu from. Are you familiar with Street Fighter 2 at all?
I am a bit. Yeah, I was more of a Mortal Kombat guy. Yeah, I did play Street Fighter 2.
Well, Ryu is this sort of like every man's hero who he's not necessarily looking to win the tournament, right? Because that's the nature of Street Fighter. It's that it's street fights. It's not really a tournament structure like Mortal Kombat was. Well, I don't know. They say there. Anyways, it's complicated. Ryu himself is looking to find the sort of what Zeno said in Final Fantasy 14, the time between the seconds, the moments in between the seconds, right? He's looking for the next challenger, and and it's not about winning. It's not about
Well, I know exactly what you're talking about, and
it is about
winning.
Have
a name.
Right, it is about winning, but it's not about the external.
So what
you're
talking about is the phrase you're looking for is to elevate yourself to the point where the only thing that matters to you, anyway, is internal validation, where validation no longer comes from an external source, and
you still test it through external sources.
You test it, so you need external to prove the internal. But what I'm saying though is internal. Again, this
because otherwise it's self-masturbation, right? Like Ryu could stay at home and just eat donuts all day and be like, yeah, I could armchair quarterbacks, right? Like that's the same concept. Like, I wouldn't have thrown that pass, some fat ass 38-year-old kid telling 30-year-old man child telling Tom Brady what to do on the field. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
And the thing is, internal validation, trust me, it's a noble goal. And in fact, it's actually one of my personal goals. But Christ on a cross, is it a hard goal to achieve? I think it's something that takes a lifetime to fully achieve, where you no longer need any source of external validation. And external validation has always existed because we're pack animals. We're animals that are part of a society, part of a group of people. I mean, we're not even genetically predisposed to be alone. You can literally go insane if you're alone 100% of the time, all the time. I mean, that's the whole point of the punishment in prison of the hole, where they throw you in a dark room by yourself for weeks, sometimes months at a time.
Right.
But it's gotten so bad. External validation, I think, in my opinion, external validation in and of itself is not a bad thing. But when it gets so grotesque and so pumped up to where external validation becomes your lifeblood, and it can morph into narcissism, which is what I think we're seeing these days in society as a whole, especially on both extremes, both the extreme right side of politics and the extreme left. I try not to bring politics into things, but like just if you don't believe me, just go take a gander at Tinder or any dating app. The external validation crave and the narcissism is palpable. Like you can cut that shit with a knife. And if people don't get it, they're literally like starving fucking vampires. Like they literally are dying without external validation. And I think that's where it gets really bad. And I think that's why a lot of people due to escapism, escape into MMOs or other games, because they need it so bad and they're not getting it in their real life that they're going to try to get it from a game.
Well, I think where external validation is okay is as long as it's in pursuit of internal validation, right?
Exactly.
Right? Like,
and
as long as you can
want external validation from, or people you respect.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
You know them and respect them, because then that means something. If someone you know and respect, gives you external validation, it props you up a little bit, puts a little pep in your step. But how many fucking famous actors...
it helps you self-correct, right?
So, how many famous celebrities do we see in the news that, where there are lines of women that want to have their babies, they're rich beyond comprehension, they have everything they could ever need in this material real world, and they're miserable and they kill themselves. Because the external validation, they're getting it by the truckload, but it doesn't mean anything to them because they don't respect or know people.
There's no or internal, or I know for example, there was a college quarterback from my state not too long ago, and he was looking to be, a fix to this particular school's football issues, and he ended up blowing his brains out, and knowing my like how much I would have loved to have played college ball,
Right.
Especially to have been in his position as being like a quarterback. Like, it's hard for a lot of people to imagine that someone in that position could be going through such tremendous pressure.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, and as someone who's been, I mean, I've been a professional, card carrying equity actor for 20 years. In certain professions, especially where the whole point of the profession is people watching you, is internal validation is even harder to depend on and to get. It gets a little, you get really in your head.
I got a question. Do you ever get that from your fellow cast members?
No,
so like there's
external validation. You mean?
No, well, an external validation that helps you internally. So, like, for example, I know there are a lot of actors who live for a lot of performers in general that live for the applause. Whether you're a dancer, actor, any performance, like they live for the applause. I know as a sports ball player myself, for me, I always drowned out the audience. It was never. Like, like the audience didn't even exist. The audience were just
to answer your question.
Game night was no different than practice for me.
Definitely,
but before you talk, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was always playing with my friends, whether I was playing on the home field or I was playing on an away field, or whether I was on the practice field or whether it was Friday night and it was game night, right? The context didn't matter. The only difference was that every Friday night, the whole league would match up who won, who lost, right? And I did. And I'm totally going to kind of throw a chip in your direction here. Is like that was the goal, was to get was to come. All of that work all throughout the week was to make sure that Friday went according to plan. Right. And when Friday didn't go according to plan, it sucked. Monday.
Sure.
So I get that. But at the end of the day, I remember in a band practice, it was a band practice, at a band recital, a younger saxophone player had come up to me and he said, like, "Oh my God, everyone's watching. How do you, do you have any advice on how to get over I've got butterfly." He was super nervous. I got butterflies in the stomach. I don't know if I'm going to be able to play well. And I told him, one, you're in a band, right? So even if you fuck up the sound, you're sitting right next to me. Like, you're a saxophone player sitting right next to me, and there's another saxophone player sitting to the left.
He's going to get drowned out.
Yeah. Even if the audience hears someone completely fuck up and they can tell that it was a saxophone, they're not going to know who it was. Yeah, they're not. They could put the blame on me for all they want, right?
Right.
Maybe the conductor will see, but then that's no different than practice, right?
Sure.
Like the conductor might see it and they might correct you come Monday or come the next day, but that's
a lot easier to deal with on a one-on-one than an audience booing you.
Two, the audience is made up of our parents.
Right.
They're not coming from they're not paying $500 for front row seats to come see us play. Right. Ode to Joy on our saxophones and clarinets. No, they're our parents, and even if we completely at the time, I think it was this was an 8th grade recital, and we would share it with the entire K through 12 program. It was in the same recital, so you'd have the little kids sing their songs, and then the parents would clap, and then the next grade would come up, and then they would do their thing, and then clap, and then it ended with the high schoolers and the seniors doing their recital, and everyone would clap. It was the same deal. So I had to tell them, they're not gonna not clap, and they're not gonna even be able to point you out. And it was the same on the football field, right? There is gonna be a score on the scoreboard, and in this case, people are going to be able to see you fuck up if you fuck up, because they could see whether or not a play worked because someone didn't make a block or someone fumbled the ball or whatever, right? They'll be able to see that, but they're not on the field, right? It doesn't matter. In order to fix the fuck up that you might have done the last play, you've got to be able to make up for it on the next play. Right. Every single play is a new interest, and you could say that with life as well. You know, every new day is a new opportunity to turn things around. You know, or at least to start moving in the correct direction.
I agree.
But where I wanted to say is, what I was getting with it, because it was the same kid. He was nervous on the football field, and he was nervous in the band recital. And what I told him was like, it's just me and you, man.
Yeah.
You know, I'm more worried if you think I'm good, because you're going to be able to hear me fuck up, right? Like if I hear you fuck up, I'm going to hear you fuck up. So you should be worried about my performance and my reaction to your performance, not necessarily the audience's. So like I was thinking, like, do you have that same sort of feeling with your fellow castmates, right? Like, so there are a bunch of mouth breathers guaranteed in the audience. They'll either say your shit because they don't know what they're talking about, or they'll clap like a bunch of sea otters because they don't know what's good and what's not.
Right. And actually, the theater is such a film's completely different, but theater is such a niche medium these days. I mean, it was the prime entertainment, 80, 90 years ago, because there were no movies, there were no, that sort of thing. So generally, the audiences you get in theater, I would say the majority of the audience members do know what's good and what's not, just because that's the kind of people that still go out to theater. Generally tend to be more cultured individuals. But to answer your question, I mean, the two biggest reasons I got in theater and acting in the first place was I wanted to tell a story as a creative outlet. I love telling stories and experiencing being through another character's eyes. And I saw the camaraderie between castmates on, behind the scenes on films and TV shows, and in my brother's plays. My brother was an actor as well. And I was like, I want to be a part of that. Now, for me, before every performance, whether the house had 25, 30 people in it, or in the houses where I performed for 800 to 1,000 people, the nervousness and the butterflies came before every performance, which was good. You use it as fuel. However,
just as an aside before you continue.
Sure, go ahead.
Even with this podcast, or even with this show that we've got right now, same thing happened to me before we started. Right, like I was like, oh fuck, what am I gonna talk about? What am I gonna say?
See, and this is kind of a new medium for you,
right? Well, no, it's not, because I had a show before and I had the same thing before. But so it's like those butterflies still. That's what weirds me out, right? It's like right now that we're 30, 40 minutes in, it's a conversation.
We're an hour and a half in, bro.
Oh shit, I didn't even realize that. So for example, that's even more of an example, right? So it's like, we're just talking. We're just talking, but we're also recording. Absolutely.
It's just us, even though hundreds of people probably watch this. But
right. What I'm saying before I pressed record, I had those feelings. But
sure, you're like, I don't want to say something stupid. I don't want to fuck up.
Right, but about 15, 10 minutes in, like they're completely gone.
But you got to use that energy, right? And it goes away. Now, to continue on with my answer, during the performances, the audience didn't exist to me if I was doing my job right. They just 9 times out of 10, I didn't even notice they were there, unless some fuck ass in the audience did something stupid that pulls attention. But for the most part, they didn't exist until, like, literally me, and that's, this came into my theatrical training and just what I learned. The only people in the entire universe that existed during the play when I was on stage was me and whoever else was on stage with me. And then once it was over, then it creeps back in of, did the audience like it? Did they, was it that? And then that's where the external validation kind of starts to creep back in after the play's over. And to that note, I would never, ever, in any show I've ever done, and at this point I've probably done over 50 shows, not including film, never have I even read a review of any show I've been in. I've seen some, but the only reason I looked at them was because that show had ended like a year or two ago. So it piqued my interest, But during, so many actors read reviews while the show is running, and I've seen actors make the mistake of, some reviewer gives them a bad review, them specifically, on a character choice or a director choice, And so then in the middle of the play, the next time the show's on, they'll change it and they'll fuck something up because the other actor that's there isn't ready for that. And they'll do something, they'll change and cater their performance because they want people to like them.
Yeah, it's a machine.
You know, only one person, and it happened to be a person with a piece of paper and a pen, had a negative opinion of their performance. And they'll completely adapt. That's how badly people want and in a way need external validation. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is bad when you let the need for external validation change you in the same way that it did those actors, you know, where they're like, oh, I got to change this. Because not only does it get in their head and fuck them up, but it fucks up everyone else in the cast that has to work with them then. Because they're like, dude, what are you doing? Like, that's not how we rehearsed it for, you know, a month and a half. You could go off the handle any time, you know? And what am I supposed to do? So it's, I think external validation is something that everyone kind of needs and wants, but you've got to find a healthy way to get it and a healthy way to accept it.
Well, yeah, because it should be in pursuit of that internal value. It should be,
exactly.
The external validation should be to test the internal validation.
Right. I think internal validation is good for a boost, but it's not something. External validation shouldn't define who you are and your personal value.
Internal validation is the core of the whole reason to do something, right? Like I think maybe that is one of the issues with escapism is that people are looking for this external validation as the end goal. You know, they're thinking that because they don't have this internal drive for something, they're using external validation as a substitute for an internal drive. But if they instead used external validation to test the waters or to test the efficacy of the internal drive mechanism that they have, then that's where I would call that's the exploration aspect of getting lost in these virtual worlds. And again, virtual worlds, I mean, we're just pointing out the aspects of MMOs, but I mean, when you're an actor, you're playing another person on stage. When you're a game player, you're playing a different character on the screen. You know, it's very much similar in the same way. So it's not at all surprising why you as an actor would be drawn to just the concept of not only gaming but MMOs in particular, where you share. Even our peers have the same sort of deal. I like to fancy myself as a sort of hobbyist writer, and that's what brings me the most enjoyment is by looking at these stories and deconstructing them, looking at their references. One of the biggest things I get from the Final Fantasy franchise is all of the mythological references that they make throughout, and how the characters that they create represent these sort of these archetypes and these mythological resources say something about the culture in which they came from, you know. So I've been able to use the Final Fantasy franchise to explore the sort of abstract world of human thought, and the Final Fantasy franchise has just been a catalyst for that. I don't use. I personally have never used the Final Fantasy franchise to escape into. I've always used it as a method or a tool of exploration of how the human mind works. Your thoughts?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely MMOs for me were definitely another creative outlet in terms of exploring, because I've always had a fascination with just the human condition, which is why the current societal, where society's at right now is so depressing. But at the same time, like I've always just fucking loved video games and stories. Of the stories that you can both create and experience in an MMO. But I think we've gone on for quite a while here. I think it's a good spot to wrap
way
it
too
up.
long. Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
So anyway, guys, down in the comments down below, tell us what you think, what your thoughts, what you agree with us, on, what you don't agree with us on. How do you feel about these podcasts? Rhomagus and I are planning on doing one of these a week. Our links to both of us, again, it's Rhomagus and Raziel. Our links to our YouTube channels will be in the description, as well as my Twitch. Do you have a Twitch account? I know you have a Twitch account, but do you have a Twitch channel, or are you still sticking with Mixer?
I've got them all. Right. So
Okay.
I've got a Mixer channel. I've got a DLive channel.
Okay.
And all of it is under my last name. So.
All right.
If you're or not my last name,
will be in the description. Links
Yeah.
to all of our outlets, my Twitch, my YouTube, Rhomagus's Twitch, Mixer, and YouTube will be in the description. What do you want to talk about next week?
Yeah, see, that was the thing. I was hoping that we'd be able to tease something out in the middle of this conversation.
I kind of have something that came to mind here.
D.
How would you feel about discussing the current status of high-profile and mid-profile Twitch streamers in general? I mean, we don't have to talk about any specific named ones, but what the Twitch streaming culture is kind of creating with gaming.
Well, ever since the move of Ninja over to Mixer, why don't we just talk about streamers in general, not necessarily just Twitch streamers?
Right.
Yeah.
So streaming in general, especially
streaming in general
as a profession. Yeah. Streaming as a profession is what I really want to get to.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's do that.
Well,
I was.
All right.
Yeah. That sounds good. So that'll be next week's subject.
Yep. So next week we'll be talking about Twitch live streaming, regardless of the platform, because I know people stream on Twitch, Mixer, DLive, YouTube, Facebook. Streaming games as a profession, what's good about it, what we think is bad about it, and what drives us fucking nuts about it. So, that's what we will talk about next week.
All right. See you next week.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. This has I'm Raziel, Game Musings with Raziel, not Game.
And I'm
Musings
Rhomagus
with Raziel.
And I'm Rhomagus. I'm Rhomagus Escapism. Yep. You can find me. You probably won't be able to spell my name just based on me saying it, but you'll see it.
It'll be in the description.
Yeah.
All right, guys. As I say on my way out, keep it real.
And see you next time.
Later.